Welcome to Parenting Successful Teens, the podcast that cuts through the overwhelm and stress of this phase and offers parents simple, practical, cognitive, science-based strategies for keeping their teens on track. Join Master Coach and real-life mom, Allie Irwin, to talk about real teens, real problems, and the skills it takes to raise successful adults.
Hey, everybody. I am in such a good mood this morning. My daughter is home from college. She has been doing the summer semester and she just came home. And so our house is full and busy and her friends are coming over and it's just, I'm in the best mood. I'm really excited about this week's podcast because it really grew out of last week's podcast. I was thinking last week's podcast was the 7 habits that I see good parents fall into, the 7 patterns of thinking that trip parents up. And after I recorded that episode, I was thinking about how many good parents feel like they're not doing a good job. How many good parents successful in their careers. I coach a lot of leaders and they still sort of feel like they're screwing it up. I got really curious and I did a research deep dive. I call them research benders. There were highlighters and Post-its everywhere. I mean, there are still Post-its everywhere because I was trying to understand, where did this idea that we're not doing a good job, where did that come from? Like, why all of my friends talk about like, well, I was parent of the week this week when they did something perfectly normal and human. And I was trying to understand, like, why do parents think that that means they're doing a bad job? I don't have to spend any time on this podcast talking about the impossible standards that we hold ourselves to, not just as mothers, but as women in general. We're supposed to be thin, but not too thin, or we're supposed to be an amazing mother and be an amazing business person. We're supposed to work like we don't have kids and have kids like we're not working. I mean, all of that, we know that all of that is just crazy. So I wanted to look and see in the research why we're conditioned to think that way. What I found that was really interesting is how old this idea is that parents are responsible for how their kids turn out. And the first incident I found of the idea of like a helicopter mom was back in 1942. There was this article written by Philip Wiley where he talked about the over-involved, overprotective, over-giving mother, over-invested is the word that he used, giving mother that was turning their kids into sniveling, dysfunctional weaklings, which is pretty harsh. And what really stood out in that article and in so many others written in the 40s and 50s and 60s is how all of the responsibility for how kids turned out was laid at the mom's feet. And if you think of, there's a really famous quote by Abraham Lincoln where he says something like, "All that I am and all that I ever hope to be is because of my angel mother." And it's a really sweet quote and, you know, it gets trotted out on Mother's Day. But in so many ways, it's kind of used as a weapon. Women use it as a weapon against themselves, that how their kids turn out is their responsibility, and their responsibility mostly alone. Knowing that this has been around since the 40s and even probably before, if you think about it, your mom was raised in that culture, and probably her mom was raised in that culture of the idea that how your kids turn out is your responsibility. So if you're not a good enough mom, your kids won't turn out well and it will be your fault. Because your mom and your grandmother and generations of women before you have grown up in this standard, now the standard is taught to you as just part of the way things are. Women in general have internalized this standard. Okay? We're too smart to think that we should be the perfect mom because intellectually we know that there is no such thing as perfect. But the felt experience of not measuring up to an impossible standard is pretty strong. The feeling of parents, because they missed a tennis banquet, like that means something about them as a mother because they had to work instead of go to the tennis banquet, that means something, and it means something about how loved their kids are going to feel or how connected they're going to be to their family. Like those thoughts slip by our radar because they come from inside our head. And even if they don't come from inside our head, because collectively so many mothers are thinking about them, we're in this crazy situation where mothers are policing other mothers and holding them to this standard. Okay. And I want you to think about that standard is coming from outside of you. That standard is coming from the culture. But because so many generations of women have been raised that way, now it comes from inside our head. Okay. And women are policing other women. Every listener to this podcast has an experience where someone said something to them when they were out with their kids and their kids were misbehaving. And I put misbehaving in air quotes because very often they were toddlers and they were behaving exactly like toddlers are supposed to behave. I have a friend that told me a story about the Walmart greeter saying something to her like, well, my kid would never get away with that, which is just crazy, right? Like the Walmart greeter, their whole job is to make you feel welcome in their store. And the Walmart greeter told her that she was a bad mom. The bad mom standard kind of boils down to these two thoughts: that we should be as close to perfect as possible, and that not being perfect is somehow a bad thing rather than a human thing, and that your child's every need should be attended to by you. Okay, if your child is having problems in school, you should fix it. If your child is unhappy because they've got some friend drama going on, you should help them. And if you think of that, there's another saying that you're only as happy as your least happy child. Like a good mother or a mother is only as happy as their least happy child. That's speaking to that idea that you can't be happier than your kids, that inherently your happiness is tied to them. It sounds like a good, loving, comforting thing, but if you think about it, if you want to be happy, you have to make your kids be happy. And that's just a recipe. If you add up like the number of kids you have and your husband and your work and all of those things, women get an increasingly small chance at happiness. So I mentioned I went on a research bender this week. And so I'm reading like all kinds of articles and research articles and just general publication articles. And Google algorithm figures out that I'm interested in this topic. And so they start sending me through my news feed other articles to read. This piece from one of the articles that they sent me kind of perfectly encapsulates the ethos that I'm trying to describe. And I mentioned that Google sent it to me rather than I went or Apple News, I guess, sent it to me rather than me going looking for it, because I want you to know that this is just a typical article. Okay. I didn't go looking for extra crazy examples. I want you to listen to the language they use and think, just notice as you're hearing it, how it makes you feel. Okay, this article is from Inc. magazine, which I would love to point out is not even a parenting magazine. It's a business magazine. And it speaks to how intertwined the expectations are that Inc. magazine thinks it should be telling you how to parent or helping you be a better parent. The headline that came through, like the teaser that's trying to get me to click on the article, said, if you're a parent, it's probably a given that you want your kids to be successful in life. But in reality, most people grow up to be just average, and some individuals have things that don't go their way at all. If you truly want your children to have the best shot of rising to the top, you need to expend real effort, time, and attention to steer them in the right direction. Here are several things that the best parents do according to research. When you're listening to that, did you notice how you felt when you read that? Because what came up for me is fear. right? They hook you in with a perfectly reasonable premise that most parents want their kids to be successful, right? That's true. Most people want their kids to be successful. But then they go on to tell you that that's probably not going to happen unless you read this article, because most kids turn out average. And there's this insinuation that average somehow isn't successful. And then they point out that some individuals have things that don't go their way at all. You know what? I would say 100% of individuals have have things not go their way at all. 100% of people have problems in their life. They try to do something and it doesn't work. They go for a job and they don't get it. They like someone and that person doesn't like them back. They buy a new car and it ends up being a lemon. Like, everyone has those experiences. That's just part of being human. And really, as a parent, our job isn't to prevent those experiences. It's to teach our kids what to do next after those things happen. It's an interesting combination of telling you that it's your job to fix your kids' problems so they don't end up average. They tell you, instead of it being fun and loving, that it's going to be real time, real attention, and real effort, that it's going to be hard. And if you're not working hard as a parent, you're probably going to have average kids. And the last piece is this idea that experts know better than you how to raise your kids. And I reject that idea. I think you are the expert on your kids. You can consult with experts and learn new ways to do things, for sure. But you are always the expert on your family. Even when you don't know what's going on, you know so much more than someone who is outside your family. So you click through to the article, which I did read, and they give you basically impossible to implement advice. Like, let your kid fail. And letting your kid fail, it's not that that's bad advice, it's good advice. But it's one of those things that they put out there with no more information. And most parents know that if their kid is failing at school or failing to hit any of the milestones that we're expecting our kids to hit, that's a struggle for parents. And when it's tossed out as glib advice with no information to help parents figure out how that's actually going to play out, how to let your kids fail in a way that will ultimately make them successful, it's just exactly the kind of information that makes you feel like you're doing it wrong and you have no idea how to do it better. And there was another article that they sent that was research from Harvard and MIT, so i.e. super experts, telling you to do one simple thing that you can do that is almost magical for your child's brain development and success. This one thing is very doable, very powerful, as brain research has shown. It is, again, the piece of advice that they gave you isn't bad advice, but there are 1.3, I did a quick Google search on just the phrase parents should, and 1.3 billion articles came back. While this article has one simple thing that you're supposed to do, if you multiply that out by 1.3 billion, it's just an impossible amount of information for a parent to take in and decide what to do with, because you know half of that 1.3 billion is contradicting the other half of the 1.3 billion. And you read all those articles and then you're accused of being a helicopter or over-involved, or you miss out on the moments because you're always reading on your laptop and now you really don't have time to go to that dentist banquet. All of this adds up to create this pressure cooker of expectation on moms. As I said, we've internalized these standards to the point, because they're coming from inside our brain, we can't hear them. We can't hear what we're doing to ourselves because we're just reporting it like it's a fact, like it's something we really believe, because we do believe, because we've thought it our whole lives. That's what a belief is. It's a thought that you've had over and over and over until it becomes automatic. And it just runs underneath like operating software. It just runs in the background and you don't even really know that you're believing something that's optional, that you could change. So I have a great example of this. So I was at brunch with my friend over the weekend, and I was telling her, I'm telling you, I went on such a research bender. And I was telling her about all the great feminist literature and literature on parents and, expectations when moms went back to work and all of the different things. And I was like, yeah, it was so much fun and so interesting, but I didn't get my podcast recorded on time. And I just feel so bad that I have to work when Catherine's home. Do you hear what I did right there? I have work that I love. And I have a pretty independent daughter who's been away at college for a year. She wants to go hang with friends anyway. But yet, I put this pressure on myself that a good mom would have gotten all her work done ahead of time and been able to take the whole week off. But that's how it is. We have to have someone outside of us help us point out our own thinking. Because even as I was preparing a podcast about how we've internalized these standards, I couldn't see all the ways that I was internalizing those standards. And truly, I think that's the biggest benefit of having a coach, because they are not inside your story and they have no judgment whatsoever about what's going on. You can literally tell a coach anything, and they're just going to help you see your own thinking. They're not there to judge you good or bad, or you did this thing. And I remember tearfully confessing mom mistakes when I hired my first coach and her just being completely neutral and giving me a different way to think about them that was like a, ray gun. It immediately vaporized them because she held up a mirror for me of my own brain. And when I could see it almost as, reflected back from someone outside myself, I could see how those thoughts were hurting me, how those beliefs, those patterns of thinking were holding me back. And I think of it almost like background music. That's why I titled this episode Bad Mom Soundtrack, because I think of it almost as like background music that's playing in our head all the time that we kind of don't even notice, but it's there and it's changing our behavior. It's making us less effective as parents. Because if you think about it, if you inherently believe that you're not doing a good enough job as a mom, you're going to be second guessing all your decisions. And you're going to be giving up on things that you should hold firm on. You're going to be more susceptible to your kid's opinion of whether you're doing a good job or whether you're ruining their life. Like if you believe you're a good mom and your kid says that you're ruining their life, you're like, well, okay, but you still have to vacuum before you go to the mall with your friends. Like, okay, because you don't believe it. But if they tell you that you're ruining their life and that you're completely unreasonable and no one else has to do this, they are so much more likely to get out of vacuuming the floor. The next thing is you're going to be looking to your kid's behavior to tell you, like as a thermometer for whether you're doing a good job or not. Okay, like if my kids are doing well, I'm doing well, which for some parents, it works. For some parents, everything just lines up, and those parents very often are a little bit smug because they think things are turning out because they're such a good parent. And what they don't really understand is they just have hit this combination where the child's behavior and the parent's expectations and everything are lining up. And I almost feel a little bit sorry for those parents, because the real gift is when you can know your good momness no matter what is happening outside of yourself. That's where the real strength and power and leadership comes from, because then you are free to parent in accordance with your family's values and your priorities, and you can show your kids what it looks like to have a strong inner compass and inner confidence. And when you don't have that strong inner compass, you're so much more likely to parent the way your neighbor does or the way your book club does, even if that doesn't line up for you. And you're so much more likely to be in this sort of low grade, chronic fight or flight where you're kind of always like scanning the radar to prevent any future problems, because if there's a future problem, you're going to have to spring into action and solve it. And I know this from firsthand experience because I have this sort of legendary MacGyver purse from my years when I thought that any problem anyone had, I was supposed to be prepared to solve. And I was really good at it, but it took a toll. I was in this sort of chronic fight or flight. I had this like low level stress, and I was always looking for ways that, like, is there a camp my kids should go to? Or how do I get booked into the SAT tutor ahead of time? And all of those things. And it felt terrible. And it made being a mom less fun for me. And it made being my kid less fun for them. It was teaching them to always kind of chronically be in this fight or flight mode. And if you look around and you look at the stress on today's teens, that is coming from this idea, this chronic idea that we have to be perfect in order to be good enough. This constant strive, and it gets dressed up as wanting to be the best. But when your best is leading to this chronic stress and chronic anxiety, and it's leading to behaviors like drinking and, numbing by spending hours on Facebook and porn and all the things that kids are doing to kind of check out of this high stress behavior, that's when it becomes a problem. And if you remember, there were a couple episodes back, I talked about how if your child goes to academically challenging high school, like those schools that we all try to get our kids into, your child is more likely to leave those really good, high-achieving high schools with a drug or alcohol problem, a clinically diagnosed drug or alcohol problem, than they are if they're in a low-income school district. And all of that is coming from this stress that we've created that starts with the stress that we're putting on moms, right? Because you can't give your kids calm and confidence and inner compass if you don't have it yourself, okay? When you're not believing that you're the expert on your family, you're not teaching your kids that they are the expert on their life, okay? My favorite pediatrician of all times, Dr. Manjarovic, if you're out there, I love you. He said that his best moms make 85% of his diagnoses. That when those moms, he knows the truly tuned in, confident moms, and when they come in and they say, there's a problem with my kid, this is happening, he knows there is a problem that he needs to find with that child. Okay, those parents come in as experts and they get better medical care. And that extends to every area of your family's life. So I want you to think for just a second, what would it be like to have that kind of confidence, that kind of inner knowing that you are an amazing mom? How would it feel like to be so steady that when your kids are going through that inevitable teenage angst and drama, you're just totally steady. You're not sucked in. You're happier than your least happy child. What would it be like for them to have a mom that they knew they could come to that wouldn't get upset, right? Sometimes our kids shield us from things because they don't want us to worry about them. So they just worry and they don't bring their problems to their parents to share. And if you are confident in your own good momness and you don't need your kids to be happy for you to be happy, they are more likely to come to you when they have a problem. What would it be like to be able to make clearer decisions because you know what your internal compass is and what your family's priorities are? And you don't worry about what the neighbors across the street think. You don't worry about what your book club thinks. And you especially don't worry about what your other family members think. So much of that criticism that we receive, that judgment that we receive, so much of that comes from within our own families. And I remember when I developed that confidence, being able to tell my own loving mother, like, you don't need to worry about it. I've got this. When she would call and she was worried about something that was going on with my kids, I would be able to say, like, thank you. You don't need to worry about it. I've got this. And then we could just move on. Think about what that would feel like for yourself if you didn't feel chronically stressed all the time about failing as a mother, like what other opportunities would you be able to find? What career opportunities would you go for? What new hobby would you pick up? What other interesting things could you think of to do as a family? I know I have a couple of clients that are even concerned about travel because they worry so much about their kids. And so they have even given up like amazing opportunities as a family and amazing opportunities for their kids to travel on their own because they spend so much time trying to prevent terrible things from happening that they can't see the opportunities for good things to happen. It's just generally more fun to be around people that are secure. If you think about wanting to all be together and continue to build those strong connections with your family, as you transition through this time, like from the relationship you had when they were younger to the relationship you're going to have with them as adults, being strong and confident and just knowing inherently that you're a good mom and that you're doing a good job, all of that will make you more fun to be around. And I'm not saying that you should know that you're a good mom so that your kids want to be around you. No, that's manipulative. And you won't actually feel like a good mom if you're just doing it so people want to hang out with you. I'm just saying it's a fun byproduct that when you know you're doing a good job and when you know, like even the crazy things that you want to do that nobody else wants to do, you aren't worried about how you're being judged, everyone is just going to have a better time. And that's what I want for you. That's why I'm hoping that you'll be motivated to start to consider to rewire those beliefs that have been ingrained over the years. The social conditioning that is making you think, that's kind of running under the awareness, that's making you think you're not doing a good job when you are. And that's why this is the first module that I do in my program, Parenting Savvy. And that's why we start there, because that foundation, bringing down parental stress, makes every other thing possible. And the meta skill of learning to rewire those old pattern beliefs, that meta skill is like the key that turns so many other opportunities. Parenting Savvy is a roadmap to help parents raise teenagers in a way that builds authentic success for that family. There isn't a single definition of success. That's why there's 1.3 billion articles out there. That's why there's so many people that are telling you that you're doing it wrong, because everyone is hewing to a different version of success. And Parenting Savvy is designed to help your family move towards your family's definition of success and your family's definition of connection. For my family, that's calls and texts and silly memes that get passed back and forth and a group chat that is extended even though my son is grown and married now. It's kids that want to visit you, that use their vacation time to visit you, that, like I said, they call even when they don't need money. They call just because they've seen something silly in the news that they think you'd like. If that is a journey that you're interested in taking, from moving where you are now to a place where you're reprogramming your beliefs, where you're learning how to manage your mind and set clear priorities and improve your communication and just generally have a better time. Like if you're interested in bridging the gap between where you are now and having that successful, connected, happy family, if that sounds like a good time, reach out to me at parentingsuccessfulteens@gmail.com. And you can either tell me a little bit about what's going on if you'd like, or if you just want to put free call in the subject line and send it, I will send you back a link to get on my calendar so that we can talk and we can see where you're at and start to develop a blueprint to get you from where you are now and bridge the gaps to where you want to be. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. And I just want you to know you are a good mom. I believe in you. I know how much you love your kids and how much you want for them. What I want for you is to see your own good job. All right. Talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to Parenting Successful Teens. If you enjoyed today's show, then I've got a treat for you. I have a free guide that teaches you how to get your teenagers to tell you about their day. No more one-word answers. And grabbing this guide is super easy. Just text the phrase, Get Teens Talking, as all one word, no spaces, to the number 44222. So that's the phrase, Get Teens Talking, without any spaces, to the number 44222. And then you'll be prompted to give the email address that you want the guide sent to, and then it shows up in your email box just like magic. You know what else is magic? Having teenagers that talk to you. Now, I can't promise that you're going to like everything they have to say, but I can promise better conversations. Grab the guide, and I'll talk to you next week.